New court documents tell us why Brian Kohberger became a person of interest in the murder case. That the killer may have stalked the victims before the murders. They show how investigators retrace Kohberger's movements the night of the crime and reveal a possible eyewitness inside the house. And they claim they found the suspect's DNA at the murder scene. It was police at Washington State University, 20 minutes from Moscow, Idaho, who likely first uncovered the name Brian Kohberger. Surveillance cameras recorded what investigators say was a white Hyundai Elantra near the murder scene on November 13th. A police officer queried white Elantras registered at WSU, and one came back to criminology student Brian Kohberger. Was Kohberger stalking the victims? That's a question investigators sought to answer when they obtained a search warrant for records from Kohberger's cell phone. Court records say on at least 12 occasions prior to the murders, Kohberger's phone was detected near the murder scene in late evening and early morning hours. Additionally, Kohberger was detained as part of a traffic stop in Moscow on August 21.
Hello. How you doing? How y'all doing today?
3 months before the killings and months before he and his father were stopped for a traffic violation traveling home to Pennsylvania from WSU in mid-December. All of this is part of tracking Kohberger's movements, which documents detail. Using cell phone records and security camera video, investigators determined Kohberger's car and cell phone left the Washington State campus at 2:44 a.m. on the night of the murders, headed for Moscow. Investigators say there were multiple sightings of the car on security cameras around the crime scene, starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20 a.m. Records say that is the time the killer murdered 4 University of Idaho college students inside their home. But there were 2 surviving roommates who were not attacked, and one of them is an eyewitness. Inside the house on King Road, one roommate heard crying and strange noises after 4 a.m. A short time later, documents say she saw a man in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose, and she watched him in a frozen shock phase as he walked out the back door. Investigators say her description generally matches Kohberger's features, and those same investigators say DNA is the proof that Kohberger was inside the home. Documents say that DNA comes from the sheath of this type of knife, called a K-bar, that was left behind at the scene of the stabbings. Investigators say DNA from that knife sheath matches a DNA sample pulled after agents recovered the trash from the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania. That's where officers arrested Brian Kohberger in an early morning raid on Friday. These documents do not indicate what a possible motive could be. What is also unclear is why these stabbings that occurred at 4 in the morning were not reported to the police until just before noon. The documents do not explain that delay. I'm Chris Ingalls in the King 5 newsroom.
And we want to dive a little deeper into the multiple sightings of the Elantra between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m. the morning of the murders. The same car drove by the house 3 different times in a low traffic area. The 4th time the car arrives around 4:04. It attempts to park in front of the house, but eventually drives eastbound down Queen Road. Police say the same car speeds away at 4:20 a.m. And this is a map of the route police believe the Elantra traveled after it sped away. It drives down Walenta Drive. After that, police believe the car then left the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and Conestoga Drive. The cell phone connected to the investigation is picked up on Highway 95 south of Moscow near Blaine. The cell phone is picked up again traveling west towards Uniontown, and that route eventually leads back to Pullman, Washington. The Gonsalves family sat in the courtroom yesterday for Kohberger's first court appearance in Idaho. And while they receive updates from police throughout this investigation, Steve Gonsalves said, as a father, it's his role to ask questions.
We knew some details, and we didn't share all those details. We didn't have it as clear and precise as how they wrote that. I mean, that was a step-by-step type breakdown. I wish I would have had it earlier. I wouldn't have been so stressed out. But we had like pieces of that story and interwoven.
And coming up at 4:30, we'll share more from that interview with Kaylee's dad, as well as his reaction to seeing the man arrested in connection with his daughter's murder for the first time. Also later this hour, we may be learning more information in this case, like a possible motive or connection to the victims through court records. The amount of digital evidence investigators seem to have collected during their investigation and outlined in the probable cause affidavit came as a surprise to University of Idaho law professor Shakira Sanders. At 4:30, we'll hear from Sanders and why she thinks the PCA was so long and what they might have against Kohberger.